Talk radio for the masses.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
If the game is rigged, change the game. Game changer.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
This is Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Radio Network.
All right. Good evening. Fade to Black. Today's Monday, March 20th, 2023. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. And tonight, Susan Schumsky is with us, and we're going to be discussing India and the Beatles. Her book is The Inner Light, How India Influenced the Beatles. Her links are below and throughout social media and over on our website. She has authored 20 books in English, released 36 in foreign editions, won 43 book awards, and has done 1,300 media appearances. Man. She was, now here's the thing, the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi's personal staff, she was there. She was on the personal staff for 6 years and lived in his ashrams over in India for 20 years and here in the United States as well. We'll be discussing all of that tonight. And I think she spent about 6 months in India. And I could have all those numbers wrong. We'll find out. But she has been a central figure here in our community for many, many years. She teaches meditation, prayer, affirmation, and intuition. Her book titles includes Miracle Prayer, Divine Revelation, Exploring Meditation, Ascension, Instant Healing, The Power of Chakras, Auras, Chakras. It's Monday. Auras, Awaken Your Third Eye. And that's right. By the way, I am still not wearing glasses. Awaken Your Divine Intuition, Color Your Chakras, the Big Book of Chakras, Third Eye Meditations, and many more. She has done 700 live appearances and is featured in several movies, including The Beatles and India. All right, divinerevelation.org is her website. I would like to welcome for the first time my good friend, Susan Shumsky, for the first time here to Fade to Black. Susan.
Hey, Jimmy.
It's about time.
Yeah, it's about time.
I mean, we've been friends for a long, long time, and we've done lots of events together. And I think we did a vegan afternoon with our good friend Serena, didn't we? No,
not so much. No.
Wait a minute. Okay, we're going to discuss that after the show. You know what they say, first the mind, then the body. That's what they say. And so I don't know if it's you or me, but it was a pretty fond memory of mine. And so I don't know, man, maybe.
What do we do there, Jimmy?
Man. Now, Susan, it's the first time on Fade to Black, and I don't know why we've taken 10 years to do this, but it's your first time here, and you get the first-time guest disclaimer. Okay? Next time you're on the show, it's not going to happen, but it's just you and I, Susan, sitting on my couch having a conversation as friends, and where that conversation starts, it starts. And where it ends, it ends. But we're going to end as friends. There you go. Are you ready?
I'm ready for all the rhymes, yes.
Yeah, the deal is if I forget the first time guest disclaimer, the audience, right? They oh man, it's bad. It's bad. They will definitely let me know. I actually want to start here. We're doing an event in 3 weeks, and I want to actually get that out of the way. We can discuss it more later on in the show, but this is very special to me. We're going on a cruise to the Mexican Riviera. This is your event, and thank you for the invitation. This is going to be extraordinary. Just the list of speakers and is enough for me. But the other part that I'm wrapping my head around, when you do a normal conference on terra firma, you can leave, right? You can go this and when you're on a cruise like this, you are in heavy concentration of knowledge acquisition. You can't escape, can you?
Well, you could go and do something else on the ship, but you're going to still be on the ship.
Right. Yeah, I guess that's part true. But how far can you go? But you understand what I'm saying, right? It's just right there, and you're
Immersion.
there. Yeah.
Immersion in knowledge, immersion in detail, immersion in everything coming to light. That's what this is about. It's called Hidden Secrets Revealed Cruise. So the idea is that all the secrets are going to come out.
Now, and I've got so many questions for you that are all first tonight because it's the first time that you've been on the show, but for the audience too as well. The inspiration for doing, because you've been doing events all over the world, right? For decades. And then to switch this over to cruises, which you've been doing this for well over 10 years. I don't know how many cruises you've done overall, but what inspired you to come up with this idea?
Yeah, as you said, I've been doing retreats and I've been doing tours and then overseas tours. My first overseas tour was to India for the Kumbh Mela, which is this huge pilgrimage that takes place every 12 years where 100 million people attend over a 6-week period. And I'm not exaggerating. That is how many come. And so I was doing these tours, all just a lot of different sacred destinations, not just India. It was Egypt and Bali and Machu Picchu in Peru and so many places. And then I started going on cruises with my sister for fun. We just started going on these cruises, And then I thought, wow, I'm doing all these conferences. I did a lot of conferences, for example, in Mount Shasta and Tetons. I was doing not only tours, but conferences. And I thought, wow, what would it be like to have a conference on a cruise ship? And so my first one I did was 2011, and I've done about 20 of them since then.
That's crazy. And I found out because I've been exploring the Navigator of the Seas. I even called you up. This ship is amazing.
It is amazing. Yeah.
It's amazing. And one of the things, I took so many virtual cruises on the ship with different people.
Right.
There is an entire conference center on
exactly.
And us, right? We're going to occupy that for 7 days, aren't we?
That's correct. We have the whole conference center for 7 days, day and night, anytime we want to use it.
It's
great.
I'm so excited about this.
It's awesome.
Now, one of the things. Now, look, it's Jason Shurka and it's Scott Walter and I mean Nick Pope, Adam Apollo, Sarah Breskman Cosme.
Mm-hmm.
Just all off the Vivian Chavez is going to be there,
and Sandra Rose Michael, Dr. Sandra.
I'm pretty excited. She's bringing some equipment too.
She's bringing the EE system, and it's going to be running for the entire cruise. Our conference room.
I can't wait but for me, okay, all of that is great. These are my friends, and we're happy. We got a section of the dining room, and we're going to be doing all of this stuff, right? It's all great. No. It's that water slide, man. It's water slide. And I found out that is, I think, now there might be one other, but it's like the biggest water slide on the ocean.
On the ocean and on Navigator of the Seas, the biggest water slide.
I'm so down for this. I'm so down. We're going to have so much fun. And I'm going to bring my sky watching gear, all of my night watch.
Oh, cool. We do have a UFO watch every night with Misha Johnston, who does that professionally in Las Vegas. She'll have her night vision goggles with her. And also Ruben Langdon is going to be doing a nightly, what's called the E5 meditation and breath work.
Yes.
So, yeah.
And he's great with that. And so I'm going to bring, I have a few different pairs of night vision. So I'm going to bring those. And,
oh, great.
And I'm going to bring some lasers. Let's see if we get shut down with that. But I'm going to do that too as well. And yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. So anyway, I'm so looking forward to this. And for everybody, the links are below. They're over on my website. They're out throughout social media. And go and check it out. And if you really want to get excited, go look at the Navigator of the Seas and see what everybody says about this particular ship. It is amazing. I cannot wait. All right. And also, I've got a balcony, right? I've got a balcony suite. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to invite some people to have breakfast with me on that balcony. So if you're on the tour, if you're coming with us, you want to have breakfast with me in my suite in the morning on my balcony, hanging out over the Pacific, come on. The links are below. We're going to have a good time. And you get to videotape me in my opaqueness on that water slide. So you're going to definitely want to do that. Okay. Let's talk about the Beatles and India's influence. And we're going to get started there. But I'm going to say this. I'm going to start here. When I was growing up, I didn't get the Beatles. I did not. And I had a way. Now, it's different today. We'll circle back. But for me, I was this. I mean, young. Even when I was young, I was a rock and roll guy, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. And I remember hearing about the Beatles breaking up and things. I was like, oh, okay, well, whatever. It didn't. And so later on in life, and there were a couple of Beatles tunes that, I kind of dug. A couple. Hey Jude, right? Long and Winding Road always affected me emotionally. But that was about it, right?
Short list.
Yeah, short list. I did like Yellow Submarine because my dad's band did a cover of it when I was a kid.
Cool.
But that was it. So you grow up, obviously I play guitar. I'm a musician. I'm in bands. And I ignored the Beatles. I was in, and then something changed. And I listened and I went, this is real songwriting. And I took this right-hand turn and I really dived into the Beatles and watched all the documentaries that I could, and then started to figure out the Paul McCartney solo stuff, Wings, loved it. But it hit me differently. For you, when you were growing up, were you Beatles? And that the other argument was, are you Rolling Stones or the Beatles, right? Rolling Stones or the Beatles. Where were you growing up?
I was a Beatlemaniac.
Fair enough.
And they arrived in the United States and appeared on Ed Sullivan show on my birthday.
So,
and I loved the Beatles. I was crazy about the Beatles. I was also crazy about the Rolling Stones, but I think I was more crazy about the Beatles.
Yeah, I didn't get the Stones either. So there you go. I was neither. I was a Led Zeppelin guy.
Love Led Zeppelin. Love.
That was my thing. Yeah. I was watching Women in Rock, this series. I think it's on Netflix. It's really good. And Nancy Wilson of Heart says in this interview, she goes, it all changed with Ed Sullivan and the Beatles. She said that was it. I saw that, and everybody was affected by that show if they saw it, weren't they?
Absolutely. It changed the world. The Beatles changed the world. It's amazing the effect that they had on the population of this planet. And really, their message was all you need is love. And it's great that they sang that on that big, huge satellite feed, because that was the epitome of their message. All you need is love.
Do you feel, I mean, because when I look back now, you have the bubblegum pop version of the Beatles, right? Songs that were written for the radio,
Yeah.
and a certain image, and then all of a sudden, right? They changed very quickly, didn't they?
It was a dramatic change once they had dropped acid. Once they took LSD, they were into psychedelics. Then came Revolver. Well, first came Rubber Soul, which started the psychedelic, and then Revolver, the full-blown psychedelic experience. Revolver and Tomorrow Never Knows was the epitome of that, which was verbatim taken from the book The Psychedelic Experience, which is based upon the Tibetan Book of the Dead. And John Lennon and Paul went into the Indica bookstore one day, and John was looking for a specific book there, but then he was looking through the shelves and suddenly came across The Psychedelic Experience by Timothy Leary and Richard Alpert, who later became Ram Dass. And he sat down on the settee and read the entire book right there. And then he composed that song and took those lyrics verbatim from that book.
Now, let's talk about drugs for a second, because that is part of the show tonight. How old were you during this period? And so I'm guessing, and I'm going to say 67, right? I'm pretty close, right? 1967, not your age, but this was around 1967. How old were you?
I was 19 years old.
19. Okay. Which means you were in the middle of it, weren't you?
Yes, I was very much in the middle of it. I was living in the San Francisco Bay Area. I was a hippie. I was a flower child.
Right.
I was totally in the revolution there. And I was I was attending California College of Arts and Crafts. And I was, what can I say? I would go to the Avalon Ballroom in the Fillmore Auditorium in Winterland on the weekends, and I'd see the bands like Led Zeppelin and Cream and Janis Joplin and all of them, that came.
Yeah, Jefferson Airplane, of course.
Jefferson Airplane. Yeah.
Santana. Yeah, Crosby.
Grateful Dead, Santana. Santana used to play at the People's Park in Berkeley. They would play there for free every weekend. I would go and see them.
Now,
Santana for free on the weekends. How about that?
The next question, I mean, it's kind of an obvious one, but we have an image of Haight Ashbury and the park there across the street and Golden Gate Park and this thing and this movement, which was about freeing your mind, and of course drugs of just about every kind. Today we look back and like it was that was the scene. But you were there. So are we looking at it lightly, or was it not like that, or was it even more extreme than the way history looks at it?
I think it was as history looks at it. I happen to have been at Altamont, right near the stage, when that fiasco took place. It was very terrifying, actually. I was afraid I was going to get trampled. And that guy Meredith, he got murdered right there. And it was quite a scene. And, some people say that was the end of the hippie era. It isn't really. I mean, I'm still a hippie. I live in an RV. I have no home base. I'm totally a free spirit and have always been. And it was the time. And, the Beatles are part of that because they were also flower children. And because of the time that we were in and the protest of the Vietnam War and the desire to experience nirvana, which all of us had, we were looking for this higher consciousness, the altered states.
Mm-hmm.
So, people don't really realize that aspect of the movement. It was a spiritual revolution that changed the world. And that was because we were seeking higher states. We were seeking nirvana. And so were the Beatles. So they wrote about it. They sang about it.
Somebody just posted, "You look amazing." And well, when you say, you were 19 back then,
Maybe I was 20. I might have been. I don't know what I was. Maybe 18. I don't know.
Everybody's doing the math real
19.
quick.
I think it was 19. Yeah.
I'll let everybody know Susan looks exactly like she does right now. You do look amazing. And
Thanks.
This is going on in the chat. Susan and I had this conversation a couple of weeks ago on the phone, and I'm still somebody's lying here. That's all I got to say. So the real truth. But I have my memories. My family, 1968, 69, 1970. My dad went back to college. He was in the Army, but he went back to college at Western Michigan in Michigan in Kalamazoo. But that's not the story. The story is I remember at that age, I was 6, 7, 8 years old at that time. I remember what I saw. I saw the protest. I saw the partying. I saw the hippie. I saw the fringe. I saw the houses that were right. We lived literally at the campus gates. So I saw all of this.
Which campus?
Western Michigan.
Okay.
Zoo. And, so I was there for it. I didn't understand it, but I remember Susan, there was this rally at the Mirror Pools, and I saw this group of people coming up the street towards our house. And there was I'm going to say 50, maybe more, in a line, one single file, all holding hands. All of them, right? As they were walking. I never forgot that. It's burned on my brain. This peace environment.
Right.
It was extraordinary.
And also the civil rights demonstrations were very, very prevalent in the 60s as well. There were, people fighting for rights. It's not just people of color, but also women's rights. Now, that was the time that Roe v. Wade was born, and unbelievable that it's been taken away. I mean, it's devastating.
So what came first? And I watched the recent documentary of the Beatles. I think it was 3 parts made by Paul McCartney's daughter. Or
the Peter Jackson was 3 parts. The one by Peter Jackson.
Yeah, was it Peter Jackson
Peter Jackson?
Okay, I thought he produced it. I thought it was written by. That doesn't matter. But you're testing my memory right now, and I'm feeling uncomfortable.
We'll test each other's.
Yeah, right. But in there were comments in the interviews about drugs, about going to India, about who did, who didn't, what was going on. And I remember the change, I think most dramatically for me was George. I mean, George wasn't talking, and he was. So what came first? Did they do acid before they went to India, or did that happen after they met the yogi?
It was before, much before they went to India. It was in 1964 that they got turned on to marijuana by Bob Dylan, and 1965 that the dentist, George Harrison's dentist, spiked their coffee when they went to his house for dinner, and suddenly they were on an LSD trip. And, he didn't even tell them that he had done that to them. And Lennon was very angry, but George just went with the flow, and he had an incredibly fantastic experience. They all did, have an incredible experience. Actually, that was just John and George that were there with their spouses that when they got spiked with LSD. It took a while for Paul to take LSD. But Ringo was down for it. You know, he went for it. They had an LSD party in California, and that same year. And Ringo was, I'll do anything. That's what he said. I'll do anything.
In that documentary, which was after they got back from India, Ringo was the happy-go-lucky guy. I mean, he always was, right? But there was so much tension in that studio between Paul and John, and George just didn't want to be there. He quit 3 times, right? And split and almost didn't come back. But Ringo, come on, man. And that was he seemed like a different person than what I thought he was, and he was kind of like the glue that was trying to keep it all together.
Yeah, he always was, really. He was just there. It's like the drum beat that just keeps going and going and going, like the Energizer Bunny or something. And that was Ringo. But he did quit briefly.
Now,
he quit too. He got pissed off one time and he quit too.
Yes, he did. He did. Now, we're going to come back to the Beatles in just a second. You also got involved in the movement as well. And where were you and what's the time period for this?
Well, I learned transcendental meditation in 1967, before the Beatles did. And I had such incredible experiences with the meditation practice that I immediately wanted to become a teacher. So I started to apply to teacher training courses with Maharishi. And he was holding courses in Rishikesh, India at the time. So I kept applying and applying and applying. I applied 3 times and I kept getting rejected because they kept telling me, you're too young. You have to be a college graduate. You have to be 24 years old. You can't do it. And I did apply to the Beatles course too, but I didn't know the Beatles were going to be there. Nobody did. But I applied to that. I got rejected again. But I did end up going in 1970 to study with Maharishi in Rishikesh. And I stayed 6 months at that time. There was a 3-month course, and then there was a handful of us, about 6 people, who stayed afterwards for another 3 months. So I did that. And not too long after that, I joined his international staff and stayed on his staff for 6 years. And yeah, you mentioned that I had been to India. I have been to India several times since then. But mainly when I was with Maharishi, I was on his staff in Europe. I lived in Europe for 6-7 years.
And TM, Transcendental Meditation, that was the Maharishi's
method, yeah.
Yeah, that was his method. He named it that.
He did.
The idea behind it was by other names, if anybody practiced it, but or a version of it, I should say. But TM, which we hear a lot about, right? Mm-hmm. Transcendental Meditation, that was the Maharishi.
Yeah, he is the person who founded it, who created it, who brought it to the West. In 1959, when he first came to the United States and came to the West, there was no, in the general population and in the dictionary, there was no mantra, there was no yoga, there was no karma, there was no avatar, no ashram. These words did not exist in the language, period. And then within 10 years, with a little help from his friends, the Beatles, these became household words.
That's fact. Ashram was not a word.
I don't think you would have found it in the dictionary.
Is that right? And mantra as well?
No way. No one ever heard of those things.
Man, I'm starting to show my age. I thought that those were words they're so accepted today in popular culture.
Absolutely.
And
there was no yoga studios back then. There was nothing like that. People didn't meditate. There was no meditation.
Now, with the Beatles, when they arrived in India, did they have certain expectations, and we see the photographs, and they're incredible, and there's a lot of film footage of the trip over there. But did they have big expectations, or what were they thinking?
The secret of life, the ultimate secret of life and ultimate spiritual enlightenment in 3 months. That's what they expected. That's kind of
that's pretty high. That's pretty lofty.
I would say it was a little unrealistic, but what can I say? They were idealistic youth.
I know. Oh man! So why are you here? To find the meaning of life.
Yeah, right. The answer. No, see, there was one day when the helicopter came. One of Maharishi's disciples owned a helicopter company, Kambata Aviation. Anyway, so the helicopter arrived to take Maharishi up and other people up on helicopter rides. And when Maharishi asked the Beatles, who wants to come up with me? And John was, me, So he let John come up in the helicopter with him. And then afterwards, Paul said to John, well, why were you so keen on going up in a helicopter? It was like, this isn't like we've never been on one. And John said, oh, I thought maybe if I was there with him, he'd slip me the answer on me own. So he thought that Maharishi had an answer, and that all he had to do was hear or get the answer, and then he could just go home because he would be,
now
have the answer.
You went to India in 1970, right?
Yeah.
And the Beatles were there in 68?
Yes.
68. When you got there, they were still talking about it, weren't they?
Well, yes. I mean,
it was a big deal.
The Beatles going to India was a huge deal. They got a lot of press. There was a lot of photographers and a lot of paparazzi that were trying to get into the ashram, the reporters swarming, going up into the trees, trying to take pictures and so on. So it was a big event, yes. And it was an international event. Not only the Beatles were there, but also Mia Farrow was there, and Mike Love of the Beach Boys, and Donovan, and Paul Horn, and, several very famous rock stars were there.
So the Beatles make it back to London. They go back in the studio, and that was a pretty heavy moment. But is it? I want to understand this part. Was it just George that went back? Did the other three Beatles return to India?
Oh, okay. So yeah, George was the one that was really into Indian music. He's the one that first bought a sitar and played a sitar on Norwegian wood, and studied with Ravi Shankar, who was, he became extremely famous at the time simply because he was associated with the Beatles, but also he was a very famous sitarist in India.
Mm-hmm.
And so George studied with him. In 1966, he went and studied with Ravi in India. And Ravi was quite skeptical that George would really stick with it. And he was right. George didn't stick it. He only stuck with it for a couple of years and then gave it up. But yeah, it was really George that was driving this whole India thing. His wife was the one who first learned transcendental meditation and then turned on George to it. And then George got tickets for all the Beatles to go and see Maharishi on August 24th in 1967. So then they went with Maharishi to Bangor, North Wales, to go on a retreat. Supposed to be there for 10 days. Only stayed a couple days because they were there for 2 days, and suddenly Brian Epstein died, their manager. So they had to leave and go back to London. But George was the one that was most interested in Indian philosophy. But I have to say that John was very, very interested also. He was really into it too. Definitely they were more into it than the other two, than Paul and Ringo.
And the music side of it, as this transition happened, which I don't think most people really understand how long the Beatles' career was very short. They went through a lot of changes, but really it's like 6 years, right? That's it. 1964.
62.
Well, yeah, okay,
60, actually 60, and then 62 is when they started making records.
Yeah, but I'm just talking about the thing.
The fame, yeah, the big fame, yeah.
64 to 1970, and
right.
That's it. And they transitioned through so many different musical styles in that short period. Most people think, like the Beatles spanned it, it was 30 years. It wasn't. It was just a little blip on the radar. It was just 6 years in and out. How did the fans react to those changes from bubblegum to very deep spiritual mind music?
That's a really interesting question, because I go to the Beatles fests, and I'll be going to one next week. And it's on the Beatles Fest, you'll see they're all fans, big fans. And you'll see some that are, they're only into the 1962 to 64. That's the only music they like of the Beatles. Mm-hmm. And then there's other ones that like the psychedelic part. And then there's other ones that like the spiritual part. And that's, there's fewer that like the spiritual part. But, there's so many genres that they played that, there's something for everyone. Really.
But the fans themselves back then, were the Beatles concerned about that with, just changing clothes that quickly between albums?
They just really wanted to explore. They wanted to diversify. That's the reason they came up with Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. They didn't even want to be the Beatles anymore. They wanted to be something different, all different incarnations. And, it was an exciting exploration for them. When you see the Peter Jackson documentary and you see them composing music, it's extraordinary to actually watch their process. And it's so interesting, so fascinating. At least I found it fascinating.
That was the documentary. Was that the one where
they were in the studio?
No. That's not my question. When Paul is writing The Long and Winding Road, and then they do a cut and they show Paul singing the actual vocals that were on the album. That was that documentary, right?
I'm not sure if there was any cuts to anything. I think maybe the Peter Jackson documentary was just them in the studio. I don't think there were cuts to other things. I think you're speaking of another documentary.
See, I think there was another one.
You said there was one with Stella McCartney did.
Yeah.
And then there's one that I'm featured in a lot. It's called The Beatles and India. That one.
I'm going to watch that after.
That's a really good documentary, by the way.
It's because
a lot of people see it on airplanes. They come up to me. Oh, I saw you on the airplane. Strangers come up to me. Oh, I saw you on the airplane.
Now, I want to talk about the book, but I'm setting everything up for the book, as you.
Okay, cool.
But
we're having fun.
What was the bigger influence? Was it that moment with Timothy Leary, or was it the trip to India?
For the Beatles to get into Indian things?
No. They went through these dramatic changes. And so I'm just wondering if the moments of LSD with Timothy Leary, or was it the trip to India that had the most influence on them?
Well, I think both of those things had an influence on them. I mean, LSD changed everybody, not just the Beatles.
Right.
LSD, when people are having these perceptions that are totally different, that is not normal, all of a sudden you're having these hallucinations and all these strange things are going on, or you're having cosmic experiences and expansion of consciousness. That's something very different than 1960 whatever year normal perception. So that had a huge impact.
Well,
and impacted their music very, very profoundly, changed their music drastically.
Right. But I'm asking because of my own experience. And there was, like the first time that I smoked pot changed me, right? But not nearly as influential as Carlos Castaneda's first book, right? That changed me. That had a very profound effect on me and my view of the world. So that's why I was asking if it was something like, Timothy Leary and LSD. And I can only imagine what the LSD was like in 1960 versus what is going on today. So, but the Timothy Leary side, or going and getting involved in TM with the Maharishi in India, I think would be more dramatic.
Yeah, I can't really judge, but they were very much changed by their trip to India. Ended up that almost all the songs they wrote on the White Album were written in India. And it had to be a double album because there was so much material. And so there was a period of huge creativity in India. And then, of course, there's the experience of meditation that changed them profoundly. But then, of course, because of the sour note at the end, it was a little bit of I think it could have been more influence if they had stuck with it, really.
And so you get all of this life experience together, and you're a Beatles fan, and you look at everything in total, and then you have a decision to write this book. Why did you decide to make that transition and publish?
Yeah, why I wrote the book, The Inner Light, How India Influenced the Beatles, which I think is right there.
Yeah, that's it.
Is because I wrote this book. This one, which is Maharishi and Me Seeking Enlightenment with the Beatles Guru. And this book is a memoir. There, you can see it better. I don't know. This has a shine on it. All right, so that is my memoir. Because I spent all this time with him, I wrote that book. And I didn't just write about me and my relationship with Maharishi. I wrote in that book about a lot of celebrities that were with Maharishi when I was around, So I wrote about the celebrities and their experiences with Maharishi, and including the Beatles. So there are some good pictures of the Beatles in there, and a lot of interesting stories. But then, it was such a small part of that book. And I realized I wanted to tell the whole story of the Beatles in India and, make really the whole good, the bad, the ugly, everything about the Beatles in India. And also I wanted to write about the influence of India on the Beatles because it was profound. The music, the musical instruments, the musicians, the lyrics. So I wrote this incredible book, which has 512 pages, and which has this beautiful cover that I actually created the collage for the cover, which I think is really cool because it's a nod to Sgt. Pepper.
Yep.
If you see that, you think, oh, Sgt. Pepper. Because it has all the people in the background. There are all the spiritual influences. It also has some Indian musicians on it. And it has Lakshmi there in the center, she's on Sgt. Pepper in the center.
When the Beatles went there, I've often wondered about this because I see, and maybe you can help me understand this. When I see the ashrams and I see that many people there, that's it. There's a lot. Are you? It's not luxurious.
Oh no!
Right?
You're in a cement barrack with cobwebs on the windows, outdoor plumbing, outdoor wash basin, outdoor toilet, and you're in a cell, and there's a cot, and there's a table and a chair.
So the Beatles weren't at the Four Seasons.
No,
they were staying at the ashram.
Yeah, they were not at the Oberoi Hotel. So the thing is, the ashram in Rishikesh is very remote. It's in the foothills of the Himalayas. It's in a very small village called Rishikesh on the banks of the Ganges River, overlooking the Ganges, about 150 feet up on a cliff. Very beautiful view and very primitive. And Maharishi asked them if they wanted to dine, by themselves and have their own exclusive dining room. They said, "Oh no, we'll dine with everybody else." They just hung out with the students that were there, and they were very friendly and outgoing. And they would go up on the roof of their bungalow, compose music up there, And
Yeah.
also George started to have like hippie music concerts up there on the roof of his bungalow. He brought his organ up there, and he would play for the 20-somethings. They would have a little rock concert every day.
And how long were they in India?
Okay, so John and George stayed the longest. They were there for 2 months. Paul stayed for about 1 month, and Ringo stayed for only about a week because he had babies at home. One of his children was only 6 months old, so he couldn't really stay very long.
Now, what were the rules with the Maharishi? Were there drugs at the ashram?
Oh, no, absolutely not.
Exactly. And
Yes.
so with TM, okay, so there's meditation and then there's TM. What's the difference?
Well, meditation is just a generic word for any kind of getting quiet, quieting the mind, or contemplation, or going into a quiet state, or just closing your eyes. There's so many types of meditation, but transcendental meditation is a specific brand of meditation. It's been trademarked, it's an actual method, and it uses a mantra. It's a mantra meditation, which it just basically you repeat a mantra in your mind, quiet. You don't say it or chant it. You just think it quietly, and it takes you into a state of transcendental consciousness. That's why it's called transcendental meditation.
And does everybody have their own mantra?
Well, everybody has a mantra, but there's a very limited number of mantras that were just distributed.
No, help me understand. I've never practiced TM. I've read, I've read some of it.
Right.
But where do the mantras come from?
From India. I mean, these are traditional mantras from India. It's not something that Maharishi invented. The mantras are very well widespread known in India, and they are chanted or they're used mentally, mostly in India. I have to say that in the Hindu temples and in India, mostly mantras are chanted. But in a serious meditation practice, they're repeated mentally.
And the Beatles were doing this.
Absolutely, they were doing it.
And how long? I'm just picturing John doing this, right? And
Yeah,
and taking this. They took it very, very serious.
very seriously.
Okay, so how long? Well, don't say how. Don't answer like however long you want to do it. But when you go into this, how long typically are you in this meditative state?
Okay. So when you first learn transcendental meditation, you practice it 20 minutes twice a day, in the morning and in the afternoon or evening. So you do it twice a day for 20 minutes each time. But when you go on one of these long meditation retreat courses, like the Beatles went on, they went on a teacher training course. That's what they did. They went on a teacher training course in India. And during that time, you would meditate longer and longer and longer until you were meditating all day, basically. And John and George got up to 8 hours a day.
That's incredible to me.
Yeah.
I mean, and were you doing the same thing?
I certainly was when I went on the retreats. In fact, I did up to 20 hours a day. And in fact, at one point, I went into my room and I did not appear for 4 months at a time. And and there were times when I was in silence also. Actually, I should say no. I'm sorry. One time I went into my room and stayed there for 2 weeks and didn't come out. And another time, I did not speak for 4 months. 4 months at a time. I didn't speak. I was in silence. So it was extreme. We did it to the extreme
Right.
back then.
And this was part of the training?
It was.
4 months.
Well, the
Were you
4 months of
studying?
silence is something that Maharishi encouraged silence. He did encourage for people to observe silence. And some of us did, and I was one of the people that did.
4 months.
Yes, 4 months of silence. That was when I was in Europe.
Now, did any of the Beatles do this?
No, they didn't do silence.
They didn't do silence.
No, they didn't.
Oh man, that
But
would
they did go into their rooms. They did go in and not come out for some period of time. I don't know exactly how many days they did that, but they did follow the instructions that Maharishi was giving to the course participants at that time. And there definitely was silence as part of that.
And what do you have with you in the room?
Like I said, you got a chair and you got a cot and you got a shelf.
And a stereo.
No, you don't.
No stereo, right? Obviously, no TV. So help me understand. There are people listening right now that are going, what? Okay, so help me understand this. You have a room, you've got a cot, you got a shelf. Is there a chair?
Yeah, there's a chair.
Okay, good.
You can sit on the chair or you can sit on your bed to meditate.
But that's it. That's it.
That's really it.
It's just you and your thoughts.
You and the meditation practice, yeah.
And so you have a book.
Would you have a book with you? No, probably not.
What? Wait. So wait a minute. Are you saying that John Lennon or any of the Beatles, I keep saying John, my favorite,
Yeah.
I was a Paul guy, still am, love Paul, are in a room for a couple of days with nothing but their thoughts?
Well, they had their guitars, they're Beatles.
Oh, okay. All right. Now I'm buying what you're selling. Okay. Now, that's okay. All right. And so was this a defined amount, or are you coming and going? Do you come when you're ready? So
the thing is that Maharishi would meet people every day. So even on those days when they, he would meet people every day for most of the course. But there was some period of time in the very middle of the course, and I can't say how many days it was, but there's a period of time during the middle of the course when you would go into silence and you would not come out at all for a few days, and you wouldn't see Maharishi at all. But he would be available if you needed to go see him. If you were having a, bad experience or scary experience or something, you could go visit him in his bungalow.
And what was the purpose of not only the 2 months there, and I know it's the meaning of life, or the secret of life, but what is ultimately the goal with TM?
Well, the ultimate goal with TM is the goal of any spiritual meditation practice, which is God realization, realizing the self-realization, God realization, finding out who you really are, and experiencing the divine presence that is within you. And in the case of TM, transcendental meditation, is to experience transcendental consciousness, and then cosmic consciousness, and then God consciousness, and unity consciousness, all these higher states of consciousness that Maharishi would talk about. And Paul wrote a song called Cosmically Conscious.
When they got back from India, it is my thought on this that they went to India as a band hoping to become closer. They came back from India different people. Every single one of them took a hard look at themselves as individuals, and they all splintered, right? They were not cohesive when they came back. Is that the right assessment? And do you think that was their goal, was to take that brother thing closer, and that's why they went to India. But the opposite happened.
I think I don't think that was their goal, for them to become closer. They were already close. They were already brothers. Their goal was to experience the secret, to find the answer of life, which they had been seeking because they were exploring with psychedelics. And those of us who were seriously interested in spirituality with psychedelics, we wanted nirvana. We wanted to reach that ultimate consciousness, that higher consciousness. And that's what they were looking for. Yes, they did become more individualized. I think your assessment is very right with that. And you see that reflected in the White Album, which is not really a Beatles album. It's an album of different Beatles, a Beatle singing this kind of song, another Beatle singing another kind of song. Not so much a Beatles album as a compilation of 4 Beatles. So that's what that ended up being. But there's many people who believe that exactly what you evaluated there. Many people who believe that. And the Beatles were different. And Maharishi told them when they were in India, he said, if you do not continue your meditation practice, your band is going to break up.
Did he grade them?
Well, it's an interesting thing, because Maharishi said about the Beatles, he said, George, he said, Ringo is always in meditation, and he goes by feeling and heart. But as for the other Beatles, too much brain is in the way. He said, George is the most advanced, and this is his last life. But John has many more lifetimes to go, and he should not give in to his weakness for women, or it will ruin him.
Wow. What about Paul? Wow, that's all accurate too.
Yeah, Paul.
Well, hold on a minute. So this is 1968. It's 1968. And did the Maharishi make these comments in 1968? Right?
Yes, he made the comments when the Beatles were there in India.
Yeah. Oh, he made them. Oh, okay. Because how accurate is that?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, history is tough. History's tough. History's always right. Right?
Yeah. Exactly.
It's always right. And looking back, the Maharishi was spot on the money.
Absolutely. I believe he was.
Yes, spot on the money. Okay. So what about Paul? We've got.
There was no comment about Paul. I didn't.
What? Why?
Probably because he didn't have anything to say about Paul. I don't know. Those are the only things that I found out, which was one of the brahmacharis, one of Maharishi's disciples, had written that in their diary.
Now, it seemed to me that watching the Beatles write after they got back, and those sessions are fascinating to watch. I'm a musician. I've produced albums. Trust me, I know the process. And it was Paul that was writing his butt off.
Oh yeah, he was the one that really wanted the Beatles to stick together. He really, really was devastated when they broke up.
Yeah.
I mean, it was bad. It was bad for Ringo too. Ringo ended up on a drunk and he just fell apart completely and became an addict. And John also became an addict, but not because the Beatles broke up, is because he was with Yoko and they were whatever. So, but Paul was trying so hard to keep them together, and he was working so damn hard to let's focus, let's get this done, let's stay together. He always really wanted to keep the band together.
Yeah, he was having those meetings. Remember that? Getting everybody together and trying to talk through this. Yeah. But you could see that George was having difficulty. I mean, this is my opinion, but
Oh, yeah.
It's there. He was just having difficulty trying to be a musician, right? And trying to be in that band. He was having a really tough time of it. And I think John was just going along, just going through the motions because it was a band. They probably had a record contract and he was there fulfilling his obligations. But it was Paul that was writing his butt off.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And George had lost heart about the Beatles because his heart was in India. His heart was with Ravi and with sitar and the Indian music and Indian musicians. And, he had written that crazy hippie album in India. He had done several albums in India. And so he was really very much into the whole Indian experience and Indian philosophy and that crazy hippie movie Wonderwall that he wrote the score for. And so he was immersed in the Indian culture. And he didn't want to come back from that. When he had to work on Sgt. Pepper, his heart wasn't into it. He said.
It's surprising to me that the Maharishi didn't make those comments about Paul, but I think maybe he was happy. He was happy with Paul, right?
I don't think he was complaining about Paul at all. No.
Yeah,
Paul
yeah. Very strange comments about John. Wow, that's just. I mean,
I thought it was pretty interesting.
Oh man! All right, let's take our break right here. Our guest tonight, Susan Shumsky, and we are talking about India's influence on the Beatles.
This is Jimmy Church of Fade to Black. Please visit all of our sponsors. We're taking a quick break here. All of the links are below. We'll be right back.
Hey everybody, it's Billy Carson, also known as Forbidden Knowledge. I want to talk to you about a very special event coming up July 30th, 2023, the Forbidden Conscious Awards. We're going to honor people who have been contributing to the conscious community for decades. People that you know and love that have helped you get to higher levels of thought and consciousness and awareness. It's going to be a live in-person event, but seats are going to sell out very fast. You want to make sure you're there in person, and guess what? You can help vote for the winners. Voting is available on forbiddenknowledge.com. And the categories are going to be social media influencer, podcast/radio host, TV host, actor, director, producer, entrepreneurs, health and wellness, philanthropists, authors, field researchers, archaeologists, space anomaly hunters, and of course, a Lifetime Achievement Award. I'll be your keynote speaker that night at the Forbidden Conscious Awards. We have celebrity guests performing. We'll have a halftime show where we're actually going to perform music for you. And don't forget about the pre-event mixer, where if you buy a box seat, you'll be in the VIP section, and you also have private access to a VIP mixer with celebrity guests. Shake hands, break bread, network, and then walk the red carpet with us and take amazing photos. It's gonna be a night to remember. You don't wanna forget this. Make sure you hurry up and get your tickets because they're selling out very fast. I wanna see you there. Forbidden Conscious Awards 2023.
On Saturday, April 1st, that's right, April Fool's Day, 2023, I will be hosting the Parapod Festival at the Hyatt Regency right here in Valencia, California. It's a live one-day podcast awards. It's a film festival. It's a full-on media event. We're going to have sky watching. There's going to be a Lifetime Achievement Award presented to Linda Moulton Howe. Right now, you can submit your podcast, your film, your TV series, any of your paranormal media for consideration. You can do all of that on the links below. For info and tickets, go to parapodfilmfest.com. That's parapodfilmfest.com. April 7th through the 14th, 2023, I'll be hosting and presenting on the Hidden Secrets Seminar at Sea Cruise. From Los Angeles to the Mexican Riviera on the Navigator of the Seas. That's right, up top, a giant water slide. You've got to check out the Navigator of the Seas. It's amazing. We've got Scott Walter, Adam Apollo, Nick Pope, Brad Olson, Vivian Chauvet, Jason Shirka, Robert Grant, Ruben Langdon, and another 12 amazing speakers and presenters. It's all simple to do. Just visit divinetravels.com/Hidden Secrets 2023. You know you want to go on a cruise with me. River Moon Coffee, makers of the Fade to Black blend. Truly the best coffee on planet Earth. Just visit rivermoonwellness.com or their Amazon store. It's all simple to do. You can check out the Fade to Black blend, the Game Changer blend, or any of their Black Moon Wellness products. It's the only coffee I drink. It is the best, and it's Doc. Again, rivermoonwellness.com.
Jimmy, you're muted. Cannot hear you, Jimmy. You are muted.
All that was the best stuff I have ever said on Fade to Black.
Yeah.
Right then.
We
Then.
missed it.
Yeah, right then. Sorry about that. Oh man, it's all that those acid flashbacks for me in the 70s. But I am surprised about the Maharishi's lack of comments about Paul, and I think that
comments about him. I just don't know what they were.
No. But what I mean is, in a public sense, right? And that his three comments about the other Beatles, I think, were very interesting. Like, I think there was more work to be done, right, on those three. But I guess Paul had it together.
Could be.
Yeah. Now, but when I talk about a dramatic change, when you consider the difference between Help and Rubber Soul, it's like two different bands. It's two different bands, and they were released in the same year.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
they evolved quickly.
I mean, seriously, if you think about it, that one band comes in and records Help, especially the song Help, and then come in and do Rubber Soul. It's two different bands, very dramatic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's where George Harrison first learned about the sitar, or learned about Indian music, was on Help. Help had an Indian soundtrack. That was because of George Martin, and it had an Indian theme. It was about thuggies. Thuggies were these kind of horrible thieves who lived in, like, I don't know, 17th, 18th, 19th century, and they would rob people and murder them and chop them up into pieces. And I mean, they were horrible. So thuggies were the bandits that were in that film. They're portrayed in that film. And there was one scene in the film where they were in a supposed Indian restaurant, and there was Indian musicians playing a medley of Beatles songs, but with Indian instruments. And during the break of the filming, George picked up the sitar and just kind of played with it for a minute. And he said, "Oh, that's a weird sound," And he got kind of fascinated with that. And at the same time, during the same filming of Help, they were riding around, and there's one scene where they're riding around on bicycles, around and around. And as they were waiting to do that scene, there was a yogi who appeared out of nowhere. And he came up to them, trotted up to them, and gave each Beatle his book, which was the first book on Hatha Yoga in the West. And he gave them autographed copies of his Hatha Yoga book. So that was when they were first introduced to anything Indian, was on the stage of Help while they were recording that.
I swear I thought that was a Krishna in that scene. You're saying it was a yogi? Man,
no, there's no yogi. He wasn't in the film. This was when they had downtime. He just came up to them and handed them the books.
Oh, okay. I'm like, man.
In the film, they made fun of Kali. They called her Kahili in the film, and the thuggies actually used to worship the goddess Kali, And Kali is a very, famous deity in India. And, but it was that film was not kind to Indians. It really, it was very racist, that film.
Yeah, I need to go back and watch it again. It's been a while since I saw it. Now, they talk about, I keep going back to the documentaries because I just watched both of them, 6 months ago. And I had a couple of friends of mine in the music industry, in the music business, text me, dude, have you seen this yet? Have you seen this? Have you seen this? And there was quite a bit of chatter about how great the documentary was. And I agree with that. But there was a point in the documentary that I thought was interesting, and it wasn't explored enough, that they didn't. Did they get in a fight in India? What did they? Who split early?
Well, Ringo split early because, like I said, he had these babies at home. And also Maureen hated the insects. The insects were really, she just couldn't handle it. So they left for those reasons. And then Paul had to leave because he came there with Jane Asher. And Jane Asher had a theatrical commitment back in London. So there was no rancor at all with Maharishi. They just had to leave. But then, yes, there was a conflict. And there was a reason why they left India, why John and George left India. There were several reasons. Well, several things happened. Do you have about 2 hours and I'll tell you? No, what happened briefly is that, first of all, there was a film that Maharishi promised the Beatles that they could do this documentary film, and he would give them exclusive rights to do this film. And they were talking about the film, and it was going on and on about the film. But meanwhile, Maharishi had promised the same rights to somebody else. Previously, he had promised the rights to Four Star Productions of Hollywood. And Maharishi's main, his main officer in the United States, Charlie Lutz, showed up at the ashram. He was in charge of the spiritual regeneration movement, Maharishi's organization. He showed up at the ashram with a lawyer and with a signed contract that gave Four Star Productions of Hollywood exclusive rights to film Maharishi for the next 5 years. So the Beatles were pretty angry when they found out about this other film that was going on behind their back. And one morning, early in the morning, John Lennon is bedheaded and bleary-eyed. He goes to the door of his bungalow, opens up the door, looks out, and what does he see in the courtyard? He sees a cameraman and a director who's yelling, "Action!" So he and George were supposed to be two-bit players in some other film. So they refused to leave their bungalow. They just wouldn't go. They wouldn't go to the lecture hall where the lights and cameras were set up for the filming. And it wasn't long after that they left. That wasn't the only reason. That was not the only reason, but that's one of the reasons.
Oh, give me another one. But I just want to say this. Did Maharishi know about the agreement with...
He did know. He was warned, and he just ignored it. In fact, he said, "Oh, that's fine that we have so many contracts. Then the glory of Gurudev, everyone can work together." Jai Gurudev, Jai Gurudev.
Always Hollywood. Always Hollywood. I'm not feeling good about that. I'm not. It feels strange. And if I was the Beatles, I would have been upset too.
Yeah, well, of course they were upset. Yeah.
And what was the other reasons?
Well, they found out that Maharishi had made a pass at one of the students there. Her name was Rosalind.
Heard about this? Yeah. Okay. You can't leave it that short. What happened?
Well, Maharishi made a pass at several people, actually. I know of 15 different women that Maharishi either had sex with or tried to have sex with. And some of them are people I've known for 30 years. Or no, it's been about 40 or 50 years by now. It's actually 50 years.
And you're not that old.
No, I'm not that old. I was 2 years old, when I was in India.
Oh, that now we're getting into something believable. The part with this though, with the Maharishi, George, who was always behind Maharishi and wanted to keep this going with all of this other stuff, contracts, Hollywood. I guess I don't know why. I don't want to say the wrong thing here because I wasn't there, but these affairs or whatever, or making passes at women, that didn't bother George. George was okay with continuing.
No, George was not okay. Paul was okay with it. He didn't care. When John got back from India and Paul said, well, what happened? And John said, oh, well, he's just an old lech. We can't go following that, quote unquote. And Paul said, well, what, there's no vow, is there? But then actually there was. The reality is Maharishi called himself Bal Brahmachari. What that means is life celibate. Life celibate. He called himself that. In fact, it's even on his passport. In my book, you see a picture of the passport in the book. Bal Brahmachari, Mahesh Yogi, So he claimed to be a life celibate, but he wasn't, So he was a hypocrite. People got angry about that.
Why?
John was very, very angry about it. He's the one that really held on to that anger. George let it go. It didn't take long before George let it go, but
I'm waiting for somebody to comment because everybody's thinking the same thought, that every time you have a leader of a group of people, it doesn't matter who it is, always gets wrapped up in this type of controversy. I don't get it. Can't we just behave?
No, not really. I don't know, guys. I don't understand guys.
Oh, it's a guy thing.
It's a guy thing,
Oh, but yeah, I don't think anybody's surprised with that. I remember hearing about it, and I was kind of like Paul. I didn't know that there were vows. That part I didn't know. Well,
whether or not he ever took a vow, he claimed to be a monk. He claimed to be. And in fact, when Charlie Lutz brought it up to him, Maharishi said, oh, I don't know anything about sensual desires. I'm a monk. Tell that to Rosalind. Tell that to Mia Farrow, who also, he made a pass at Mia Farrow. He made a pass at Rosalind. He made a pass at a woman, a Swedish woman who was there when the Beatles were there. He made a pass at her, and in fact, did more than make a pass at her. This was all while the Beatles were there during that period of time. And then I know a fourth woman from England that he did the same thing when the Beatles were there.
You would think that he wouldn't have to do that.
You would think, yeah.
All right. There must be anyway. There must be accessibility. That's all I'm saying. There's got to be to get wrapped up in that. I wanted to talk about Ravi Shankar though for just a second. Okay. Because we've talked about Ravi a lot tonight. He absolutely blew my mind. And I mean it like this. When you see a guitar player pick up a sitar and think that he can play it because it's got frets and it's got strings and therefore, right? Okay. And you know where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
And then you see Ravi play. He was he was a moment in time. He was a gift from God.
Definitely,
an incredible player. You have Hendrix and you have Jimmy Page, you have Eric Clapton, Jeff Beck, or whatever, where you watch them play and you go, okay, they're a master. That Carlos Santana knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
And Ravi Shankar would do that to you. When he started playing the sitar, that's how it, right? He was
amazing.
Yeah. He was the Jimi Hendrix of the sitar, wasn't he?
He was, and he was very well known even before the Beatles ran across him. He was already a celebrity in India, and there was a lineage. He came from he studied with Ali Akbar Khan, his father, Aladdin Khan. He and Ali Akbar studied with Aladdin Khan. And there was also a daughter who was Ali Akbar Khan's sister, who got married to Ravi Shankar. They were wed. And she was 14 and he was 21.
You can hear he just stands out.
Yes.
He played at Woodstock, didn't he?
He did. He played at Woodstock with Ala Raka, his tabla player, and with Kamala, his lover, Ravi's longtime girlfriend that he had the whole time he was married.
Yeah, check this out.
Kamala Chakravarti was her name.
Yeah, somebody just wrote a completely different animal. Guitar and sitar are not the same thing. Ravi,
absolutely. Yeah.
Ravi was the Jeff Beck of sitar.
Yes.
There's no question about it.
Yes, he was very skilled. But I have to say that his wife was more skilled than he was.
Is that right?
She was the one that was really the master. And she taught many, many musicians that are very famous in India and throughout the world, including a very famous flautist. And she was a master of many, many instruments. She embodied her father's mastery, Aladdin Khan. So there was a little jealousy there between Ravi and his wife, and that's why they didn't really last.
I'm really curious because there was a lot of musicians. It wasn't just the Beatles, but John McLaughlin, and the musicians of the highest caliber were suddenly influenced by Indian music, Ravi Shankar, and it came like a wave very quickly.
Huge wave, yeah. Yeah, the Yardbirds, the Kinks were the first ones. And then it went from there.
Yeah, it was all over the place. And so how did the John McLaughlin thing was the Mahavishnu Orchestra, right? How did the Beatles meet Ravi? How did that happen?
Okay, well, they were involved with the Asian Music Circle because they needed musicians for help. They needed Indian musicians. And they got them from George Martin was associated with the Asian Music Circle. And that's how George started studying sitar with some of the musicians that were in the Asian Music Circle, which is a thing in London. He was in London. And so he was involved with that for quite a while. And then the Angadi is the name of the gentleman who founded the Asian Music Circle. And one day he wanted to get George together with Ravi, but he wanted to do it in a very informal way. So he invited both of them to dinner. And that's where they met. And Paul showed up too, unannounced. Paul crashed the party, so he was there too. And that's how they met. And there was an immediate connection. And Ravi was very impressed with the sincerity of George and how he really, really wanted to learn. And in fact, Ravi was more than just a music teacher to George. He introduced him to Indian philosophy. He gave him books by Vivekananda. And so Raja Yoga was one of the books that Ravi gave to George to learn about Indian philosophy. So he was very, very influenced by Ravi in spirituality. And then after he studied with Ravi for a while, Patty Boyd and George went to India to study with Ravi.
So, did the rest of the Beatles kiss and make up with
Maharishi?
Yeah, with Maharishi.
Okay, so yeah, John Lennon. It was 1969, December of 1969, and a friend of mine was in the room with Maharishi, and they were discussing plans for the next teacher training course and so on. All of a sudden, Maharishi's secretary came barging into the room and said, "Maharishi, I have a telegram here, very important." And Maharishi said, "What it is?" And the secretary said, "Oh, it's from John Lennon." Maharishi said, "Who?" The secretary said, "It's from John Lennon, Maharishi." And Maharishi said, "Who?" And the secretary said, "John Lennon of the Beatles that were here." And Maharishi stopped and turned away from the secretary, and said, "I do not know a John Lennon."
What?
That's exactly what happened, yes.
Okay, why?
He was mad at him, that's why.
I mean, really?
Because John Lennon was telling the press that Maharishi is not what he, not all he's cracked up to be. And he was making passes at Mia Farrow. And he said it in the press, And then George Harrison, okay, so he tried to make amends with Maharishi. Not that he needed to. I mean, the reality is they left because Maharishi was being hypocritical. So they shouldn't feel guilty, but they did. So George tried to make amends. He tried to come back. He kept calling Maharishi's secretary over and over. A friend that I know, Connie Larson from Sweden, told me about how he was the go-between between Maharishi and George. And George kept saying, "I want to come and visit. I want to come and visit." Maharishi wouldn't even talk to him. He refused the phone call. He told Connie, he just nodded to Connie, motioned to Connie to hang up the phone. And then another time when he called about 4 times. Another time, Maharishi gave a message to Connie saying, "Tell George that he should do tapas for a year." That means austerities. He should meditate for a year, and then he can come back and talk to me, whatever. But that never happened. But then eventually he did, after George was diagnosed with cancer, and he eventually did have a meeting with Maharishi. And so there was some closure during that meeting.
But before John died, nothing?
Correct.
Nothing?
It was like 1991, I believe, was when George had that meeting with Maharishi.
Right. And Paul, Ringo, right out.
No, they didn't. They never had an issue. They left because of other reasons, and I don't think they were. Well, actually, there is an interview where I heard Ringo bashing Maharishi because of his indiscretions and whatever happened over there.
What right after all of this, because everything happened so quickly. Once the recording stopped, that was it. The Beatles never really got back together, right? They played on the top of Apple Records, right? That was
yeah.
And that was it.
That was it, yeah. But they had solo careers that were very successful. Paul, George, Ringo, John, they all had great solo careers. Very prolific.
And going back to this, do you feel at the breakup when they finished recording? I think the attitude was, okay, I'll see it. We'll all see each other in a couple of weeks, right? They were taking a little bit of a break. Do you think that they actually knew that was the end?
Oh, I can't read their mind.
Well, you know what I'm saying, though. I mean, because I just think it was unexpected. that they didn't get back together. Brian Epstein had a lot to do with that too, as well. I think that he was the glue.
Yeah, he was a lot of the glue, but they were just going in different directions. Especially George. He, like I said, his heart wasn't into it. Even back when they were doing Sgt. Pepper, that early on, he had already given his heart to India. He was really into India. And after he left Maharishi, he went on to be with Prabhupada, with Bhaktivedanta Prabhupada, who was the founder of ISKCON, the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. And George got involved with that and involved with his own career. He wanted to make music, and he didn't want contentious experience. He wanted harmonious experiences of making music, which is what he created with his solo albums.
You're losing your voice, huh? Are you losing your voice?
My voice is back. My voice is fine.
Is it fine? I was looking over your notes for this, and there was a couple of things that I wanted to go back and touch upon, which was Dear Prudence.
Yes.
Who was Dear Prudence?
Prudence Farrow. That was Mia Farrow's sister, who had always lived in kind of the shadow of her sister's glorious fame and was very jealous of her sister and so on. And Dear Prudence, she was really into transcendental meditation. She was very serious about it. And she first told her sister about it, who wasn't really very interested. But then once the Beatles got into it, Mia became interested in it also. And so she talked to Maharishi on the phone and made arrangements to go to India to study with him in Rishikesh on the course. And so they were both in India, and Prudence was really into this whole silence thing. Let's go into the room, let's be silent, let's meditate 20 hours a day, and that's what she was doing. But unfortunately, Prudence had had a history of drug abuse. She had been a drug addict and also alcoholic as a teenager. She came from a famous family, the Farrows, John Farrow and Maureen O'Sullivan was her mom. And they were a famous director, famous actress, mother, they were absent basically. And so her childhood was a bit difficult, and she ended up actually under psychiatric treatment. And she had had some psychotic episodes. And unfortunately, when she went to India, she had another psychotic episode. But amazingly, miraculously, it was very severe. But amazingly, within a very short time of just like 3 weeks, Maharishi brought her back from that state. And she was at the very end of the course. She was happy, outgoing, smiling, having lovely conversations with people. Whereas before, she couldn't even recognize anyone. It was a devastating thing that she went through. During that period of time, while the Beatles were there with her, Maharishi put the Beatles into a little discussion group. She was in a little group with George and John, and Maharishi wanted them to look out for her. And so then when she went into this silence and she wouldn't come out of her room and no one could get her out, and she was like in a catatonic state, and Maharishi was just asked John and George to look after her for a while. He asked them to do that. And John wrote this song, Dear Prudence, won't you come out to play? Come out of your room, come out to play, greet the brand new day. So he wrote that song for Prudence. And they didn't actually sing it to her. People think that they sang it to her during the time. They did burst into her room one time and sang Obla Di Obla Da, and they sang Sgt. Pepper's song, but they didn't sing that song. But right before George was leaving, he left Prudence a note. And the note, it said that John had written a song about her. So she was waiting for that song, and finally it came out, and her mom played it for her. She was so relieved because she was afraid that it was going to be making fun of her, but she loved the song. She thought it was
a great
sweet.
song. It's a great song, but he wrote that
in India.
Not during the studio.
He wrote it in India.
Wow. And it takes on a whole nother light now. I never knew about this isolation thing.
Yeah.
No, that was the first. I'm very impressed that the Beatles. I mean, when you think about who they were, who was more famous than the Beatles back then? Elvis, maybe, right? I mean,
no one was more famous than the Beatles then.
Nobody. And so for them to have that kind of discipline, to allow that kind of teaching. And to go along, I'm very surprised. But now thinking of the words and the lyrics to Dear Prudence, it's a whole different song to me.
Yeah, this book is told through the songs. So the chapters are songs, and then I explain the meanings of the lyrics and the music and the musicians and everything.
So the book is this thick. I started.
It's very thick.
Yeah.
It's a fat book. It's got 512 pages. It has 950 endnotes. That's how well researched.
It's no joke. It's no joke.
It's an encyclopedia.
There is, by the way, I just want to let everybody know, and Susan, you're going to love this. I think you're going to love it. There's a new animated series out on Netflix called Agent Elvis. Have you heard about it?
No, it sounds great.
Hear me out. It was created by Priscilla, and Priscilla voices her own character in this. He's Elvis, the secret agent. He's Elvis, the singer. But and for the first time, I don't think this has ever happened before. It's because of, Priscilla created this series. It's adult themed, lots of drugs, lots of foul language, lots of partying. It's funny. It's for adults. It's not for kids. But here's the trip. There's just like 2 episodes of the Beatles and Elvis and Acid and those albums.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Go. Timothy Leary's in there.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Go and watch it. I was so excited to do the show today. I'm watching this over the weekend. I'm like, man, Susan I was going to call you.
Oh, yeah.
But it's called Agent Elvis, and it's amazing. It's 10 episodes.
This sounds fun.
Oh, it's
Elvis.
It's for adults. I'm just telling you right now, if you can't handle adult stuff, it ain't for you. I'm just speaking to the audience.
Yeah.
But it is spot on the money. So Priscilla and Elvis drop a couple of sugar cubes. Okay.
Yeah.
And Priscilla is just imagine this. Priscilla is voice. It's Priscilla Presley. And she created and so she's watching TV on acid, and Paul McCartney comes out. It's the Yellow Submarine cartoon, right?
Yes.
You remember that?
Wonderful, yeah.
Yeah. And Paul comes out of the TV and starts hanging out with her and talking to her about the Beatles and psychedelics and what it's like to expand your mind. And this is what the Beatles are all about. You could go and watch it. It's tremendous. It's 2
Sounds really cool.
Yeah, it's 10 episodes. And then here we are talking about all of this tonight. And it's in this new TV series. So it's called Agent Elvis. But what about Bungalow Bill?
Okay, Bungalow Bill. So there was a woman named Nancy Fisher, Nancy de Herrera. Anyway, she has a son named Rick, and he came to India to visit her. She was taking the teacher training course there when the Beatles were there. And her son Rick came to do hunting. He didn't come to take the course. He came, he brought his rifle and his gun. I mean, listen to what I'm saying. Think about the lyrics of that song. So he came with his rifle, and he always brought his mom. He brought his mom to go hunting with him. So they went on a safari. Safaris these days are, you go and look at animals. Well, safaris back then, you go and kill animals and bring back taxidermy from India. So that's what he was doing. So they went to the hunt, the safari, and they were up on elephants, and they got off on from the elephant onto the platform up in the tree, and the tiger came. They would draw the tigers into where the kill zone was. So the tiger came and he shot the tiger. And then when they were done with that, they went back to the ashram to tell Maharishi of their exploits, and actually believed that this Hindu vegetarian yogi was going to want to hear about them killing a tiger. So they went to tell Maharishi about it, and John Lennon happened to be in the room at the same time with some other Beatles. And so Maharishi was just glaring at Nancy Jackson, who was telling the story about the kill, the tiger kill. And Maharishi was glaring, and young Rick said, Maharishi, was this something that I shouldn't have done? Maharishi said, well, do you think you'll ever kill a tiger again? And he said, no. And John Lennon chimed in, and he said, well, don't you think that's a little bit life destructive? Which is very interesting that he said that phrase, because it was a phrase that Maharishi used to use all the time. He used to talk a lot about life destructive actions and life supportive actions. And so at the time, obviously, John was very much under Maharishi's influence, because he said, don't you think that's life destructive? So that's Bungalow Bill. And if you listen to the lyrics, everything that I said is in there. All the details.
What about Sexy Sadie?
Okay, so when John and George were about to leave India in a big huff, they were waiting for the taxis to come. And as they were sitting there at the dining table waiting for the taxis to come, John created a song. And it was called Maharishi. Maharishi, what have you done? You made a fool of everyone. So he wrote this complete song about Maharishi. And later, George said, you can't say that. Are you kidding? Let's call it something else. Something like, Sexy Sadhu, Sexy Sadie, something, but not Maharishi. So that's how that came about.
What? Because it rhymed?
I'm not sure why they call it Sexy Sadie, but I like to think it's because it was Sexy Sadhu. I think maybe they might have gotten that from Sadhu, Sexy Sadhu.
Yeah,
Sadhu is a monk from India.
Sexy Sadhu.
Yeah, but I don't know. That's just something I made up in my mind, Sexy Sadhu. But George is the one who gave it the title, Sexy Sadie.
The influence of India on the Beatles, I think that influence cannot be measured. But what about you? What about you? Because you spent 20 years. Do you still practice TM?
No, I stopped practicing TM when I found another meditation that I liked better, and then I started writing books about it.
Was it the Maharishi? Why did you stop?
Oh, I loved transcendental meditation. I always had fantastic experiences with TM. I think it's a fantastic, great technique. It's just I found another technique that I liked more. I learned it from someone else. And then I wrote this book, Divine Revelation, which was my first book, which was published by Simon & Schuster with a great miracle that happened. And then, I've written 20 other books in English, and I've done 39 foreign editions. And this book, Maharishi and Me, has won 13 book awards by itself.
What did you think of John's comments about the Maharishi? I obviously this is controversial, but for him not being who he says he is, what do you make of those comments, and why do you?
Well, it's true. He wasn't. He was he was having sex with women. I mean, at least he wasn't a pedophile that I'm aware of, but he was having sex, consensual sex with women, and some of them, there's a gray area when it comes to consensual when you're dealing with someone who is supposed to be like a god, who you kind of worship like a god and who portrays himself to be this incredible spiritual master. And you think, well, I guess I better go along with this. I mean, is that really consensual? There's a question about that. And a very close friend of mine who was with me in India and whom I've known for 50 years, Judith Bork, she wrote a book called Robes of Silk, Feet of Clay. And in that book, the whole book is about her love affair with Maharishi. And she had sex with him when I was right there, the same time that I was there in India with her. And afterwards, because we stayed on after our course, we were there for about 6 months. And she was one of that handful of people that was there with Maharishi alone. And that was going on right at that time with him.
Why does that? I mean, it doesn't affect TM.
No.
Right? It doesn't affect the process. I mean, why it matters if you're lying about it, right? If you say that you're claiming to be somebody and then you turn around and do the opposite of that. But if he would have just been a ladies' man from the very get-go, then none of this would matter, right? It's the fact that he's misrepresenting himself.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, that leaves a bad taste in people's mouths, I think. It certainly did with John and George. And George is very devastated by it because he had placed so much of his hopes in Maharishi. And John was extremely angry.
What happened to the ashram after that, after the controversy?
Well, it wasn't too long after that the course moved to Kashmir. But another friend of mine who was there at the time, he told me that Maharishi was devastated. He said that Maharishi was like gray and ashen, and he no longer had this kind of vivacious, incredible yogic shine, this brilliance that he was so well known for. He was such a charismatic, incredible individual. I've never met anyone like him. He was so amazing. And when the Beatles left, it was just like all the life drained out of him. And that friend who was from England, when he had his exit interview with Maharishi right before he left the course, Maharishi asked him, "Do you know the Beatles?" And he said, yes. I mean, not really knowing what Maharishi was asking. Obviously, he knew the Beatles because they were there with him in India. He knew them from being with them in India. So he said yes. And Maharishi said, well, if you see them in Liverpool, tell John that I want him to come back to me. And it really made my friend cry. He was very saddened that Maharishi had been hurt so deeply by John.
And John, at that point, the Maharishi, to John, was just a canceled check. Yeah. Right? I mean, he's moved on. He's completely gone in another direction. Yeah. And there is, somebody like that, a big personality, no matter what he learned in India. But once you do that with somebody like, John, that's it. I don't think there is repairing. I don't think it's even possible.
Yeah, well, he did want to come back. And there is evidence that he was there in December. It's part of history that he was in Delhi at that time that I heard the story about him trying to come back to the ashram to visit Maharishi. But, many people believe that the reason why John and George left is because John wanted to get it on with Yoko. He was waiting. He was okay. So Cynthia Lennon was really looking forward to having a second honeymoon in India. She thought it was going to be this great romantic thing. But John only stayed in the room with her for about a week or two. And then he left the room and got a room all his own. And once he was on his own, he would revel in telegrams and letters from Yoko Ono every day. And he was just thinking about her the whole time that he was in India.
Have you ever seen the video? I'm just going to bring this up. I have to. We're talking about Yoko. Have you ever seen the video of Frank Zappa with John Lennon and Yoko singing backup vocals? Have you ever seen that?
No, but I can't imagine what it was like with her singing. It must have been awful.
It's like animal screams.
Yeah. I have heard her sing with the animal screams, yeah, but I don't think it's how one with Frank Zappa.
Man. I think there's another one. Is it Chuck Berry? I think it's Chuck Berry with John Lennon, and Yoko starts doing in the background. And Chuck, I think it's Chuck. I don't want to be right. They're like doing Johnny Be Good, right?
Okay.
And the Beatles covered that, for years. And Chuck turns around and looks at Yoko, and you don't want Chuck Berry to give you that look. That's the guy that you don't want the look from. Zappa just kind of put up with it, okay. But yeah. Why did I bring that up? So I kind of want to end the show on this, even though we're talking about India. And I wanted to talk about where you were today with your side of TM. But here's the thing. John had a UFO sighting in New York City. Yeah. And when he talks about this, and he was on the top of a building, and he's looking out over Manhattan, and he sees a flying saucer, right? And it's lit up, and he goes public with it and talks about it. What did you think when John went public about that? And it was pretty controversial at the time, and it would be even today. But he had a UFO sighting in Manhattan.
Yeah. So do you know what year that was?
I think it was 72.
Yeah. So I was with Maharishi. I didn't even know about it because I was at his various ashrams. I was in Europe with him at that time. So this was the 70s. The 70s are lost. Everything happened in the 70s. I was in the ashram. There was no media. There was no newspapers. Wow. There was no TV. It was just me in the ashram. I was working for Maharishi, and we were holding teacher training courses in Europe. So in 72, I was in Mallorca. By the way, John and Yoko came to Mallorca when we were there. And really? They kidnapped her daughter.
Oh.
Tony Cox. She had a daughter. She has a daughter, Kyoko, with Tony Cox. And Tony Cox was on the teacher training course with Maharishi. This was in 1971, in April, I believe. And so Tony was meditating on doing what they call long rounding, which is meditating for, all day. In between meditation, you would do some yoga exercises, some yoga postures, and you would do some pranayama, some breathing. So he was on that course, and he was on the teacher training course, Tony Cox. And so his daughter, Kyoko, which he had custody of her, and she was at the childcare on the course. All of a sudden, John and Yoko show up at the desk of the Hotel Samoa, which is where I was staying. And a friend of mine, Billy Clayton, was there, and he immediately recognized them, even though they were wearing dumb disguises, trying to disguise themselves. And they said, where's childcare? And so someone pointed them to childcare. They went, and she took Kyoko and kidnapped Kyoko from childcare. And so they ended up getting arrested in Mallorca.
And you were there.
I was there, yeah.
Wow.
When that was going on.
I just want your opinion. I just got to do this.
Yeah.
What was Yoko's, did she have what was, how did she
Land him?
yeah. I mean, how, trying to think of I'm just trying to be polite here.
Yeah. How did she land John Lennon?
We all just like, what? Everybody to this day, what was going on? Did she have some crazy pictures or something? I don't know. I mean, how did that happen?
Cynthia Lennon, when she met Yoko, she was philosophical about it. She actually believed that he was her soulmate, that really he was more suited to her than to Cynthia. And he loved her like crazy. He was crazy about her.
We know that, but that's not the real story. I mean, that's
how did she land him? Relentlessly. That's how. She doggedly chased him relentlessly. If you read the story of how she went after him. Okay, so they're getting ready to go to India, right? So they went to the TM Center there in London to make arrangements to get the tickets and everything. They walk in the door, and who's sitting in there? Yoko Ono. Yoko Ono is sitting there, and like, what is she doing there? And so, they have the meeting, whatever, and then at the end of the meeting, they go down to the limo. John and Yoko go to their limo because they're going to leave the meeting. And the chauffeur opens the door to the back of the limo. And out of nowhere, Yoko Ono jumps into the limo. So John says, would you like a ride somewhere? And she gave him the address. And then she didn't say one word. And then they dropped her off. And Cynthia says, what was that all about? And John was like playing dumb. Oh, I don't know why she was there.
We've all questioned, we've all scratched our heads. It doesn't make any sense. And I think that a lot of us, back up and go, John's a smart guy. She just must be very talented and very creative, and he gets it, and he gets her. And it's just something that they're at a level that we don't understand. And I think that's how we kind of rationalize it ourselves. But here's the real truth. You've got a band, but you've got a guy like Paul McCartney, your creative partner since you were 14 years old, right? That you've climbed them to the mountaintop. Mm-hmm. And you get each other. And is that worth giving up for Yoko?
You gotta wonder.
I don't get it. And none of us did. And the running commentary in pop culture for 50 years has been that Yoko broke up the Beatles. Right? Mm-hmm. That's it. I mean,
sort of did, sort of didn't, but yeah, there's that. There is that.
The pop culture, the world put that on Yoko. I didn't plant a flag here. You've heard all the same stuff that I have.
Yeah. And the thing is that the Beatles very much resented her coming to the sessions because they had a pact. Only the musicians are to be in the studio. No one else, no wives, no girlfriends are allowed. And that was the way they operated. And then all of a sudden, now they're recording the White Album, and that's no longer the case. Now we have Yoko.
Right there. She's sitting right there.
In all the sessions, she's there. I don't like that. They brought in a bed for her to lie on.
Yes, man. George Martin must have lost his friggin' mind. George, I met George. I don't know if you've met him. I got to hang out with him for a day, and cool. It was awesome. And somewhere I've got a really cool autograph on a Beatles CD from him, and I think he did sign a Jeff Beck CD for me too as well. But he's so he's a gentleman.
Yes.
Right? He's regal. The dude is like royalty. There's no question about that. Very educated guy, but he knew the art of recording.
Yes.
He understood orchestral written sheet. He was a musician's musician, but he's also a great producer with great ears.
Yeah.
And he had control of the situation with anything that he was involved in. And then Yoko comes in and he lost control of it, man. He must have lost his mind. Susan, you're the absolute very best. And now,
so are you.
when I show up for the cruise,
yeah.
What time should I get there? Do I have to get there early?
Well, you have to check in. Have you checked in yet?
I'm just cracking
online.
I've already done all of that.
Okay.
Is there? For everybody that is going on the cruise, if you're driving, if you're flying in from out of town, that's all done. You're going to arrive at LAX. You're going to get on a shuttle. You're going to go down there. You're going to be all taken care of. What if you're local? How do you go about that? Can you park? Is there valet?
Yes, there's parking.
Is there a valet?
I'm not sure about that.
I'm a valet guy. I don't park my own car.
You'll have to check on that. The phone number is listed on the website in the transportation page. All the details about parking are there.
I'm just messing. I'm a valet.
Oh, you're messing with me. Okay.
I'm just messing with you.
I just take you
I'm so
face value here.
I'm so excited about this. We're gonna have a great time. It's gonna end too quickly. I already know this, but for everybody that is going down, when you see Susan there, go up and say hello. We're going to be hanging out. We're going to make friends, and at the end of this, at the end of 7 days, just like anything like this, you make friends for life. And these are memories, and I can't wait to go and get this started. Susan, thank you so much.
And thanks for inviting me. And I'm so excited you're going to be on the cruise. Yay!
It's going to be great. I'm hosting a bunch of panels. I'm actually doing a presentation. I've got a bunch of private family videos that I have put together that I'm going to be showing from Egypt.
Awesome.
I shot about 10 hours of video while I was in Egypt.
Mm-hmm.
I've only shown maybe 10 minutes of it. Right.
Yeah. Oh.
And I'm sitting on all of this and I can't wait to go through this. For me, I know we're over time here, but I'm just going to wrap this. There is, once you can talk, if you've been to Egypt, you know.
I have, yes.
You can talk about the spiritual side of this and the experiences. I think most people, well, they might act like they're interested, but you lose their attention after a little bit. It's a personal journey, but when you see the video that goes along with the story, not slides, not pictures, when you go through the video and people get to experience that side of it, I don't think it happens enough. And I am going to share some of these private moments in Egypt that I haven't shared with anybody. So I'm excited to go.
That would be great.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome. It's going to be awesome. So I'll see you in about 3 weeks.
Less than 3 weeks.
Yeah, I know. Well, today's the 20th. It's
April 7th. We're sailing on April 7th.
So it's 17 days. It's not even 3 weeks.
That's
my goodness.
Not even 3 weeks.
Before we know it, I got to go do laundry.
Right.
I'll see you on the 7th. Thank you so much, Susan. Susan's link.
Thank you for inviting me.
The website is below for the cruise. Susan's personal website and her book are all below and throughout social media. Enjoy the rest of your night, Susan. Thank you so much.
You too. And thank you.
Great conversation. And I know that we went over tonight, but it was an amazing conversation. Susan Shumsky. And again, her links are below. And the book is a great read. All right. What's going on? Oh, tomorrow night, special report on artificial intelligence. Wednesday night, right here, David Palmer. That's because Thursday, he's here Wednesday. Thursday, Pluto is entering Aquarius, and that is happening on Thursday. That's a big deal. Thursday night, Ronnie LeBlanc. Friday night, our Linda Moulton Howe special event. That's right, 5 nights of Fade to Black this week. There you go. All right, so until tomorrow night with my special report on artificial intelligence, I want everybody to behave. Enjoy your evening. Fade to Black is produced by Hilton J. Palm, Renee, Dennis, and Kevin. Announcers, webmasters, Drew the Geek. Music, Doug Aldrich. Intro, Spaceboy, spaceboymusic.com. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Game Changer Network, and this broadcast is owned and copyrighted 2023 by Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network, Inc. It cannot be rebroadcast, downloaded, copied, or used anywhere in the known universe without written permission from Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Until tomorrow night, be safe. Go Beckley Teppy.